Do you believe in cursed games? I'm not talking about the silly playground rumors you heard as a kid, like the one about blowing into your cartridge making the game angry, or the idea that holding down the right buttons would unlock a hidden world Nintendo didn't want you to see. I mean really cursed. Games that don't just break, but break you. Games that carry something inside them, something that shouldn't exist. You've probably heard stories before. Haunted cartridges, bootleg versions with blood where there shouldn't be blood, hacked copies that whisper secrets when the volume's low enough. And maybe you've rolled your eyes, thinking, that's just creepypasta. That's just internet campfire tales. But if you're still listening right now, then part of you isn't so sure, is it? I used to laugh at those stories too. I used to think they were written by bored kids who spent too much time online. But that was before I found the cartridge, before the late night hours where the screen glowed like an open wound in the dark, showing me things I couldn't explain, things I couldn't laugh away. And here's the thing I need you to understand. Once you've seen it, once you've played it, you can't ever unplay it. The memory doesn't fade like a bad dream. It festers. It grows sharper. Sometimes I wonder if the cartridge is still running, even when the console's off. I shouldn't even be telling you this. Every time I think about sharing it, I feel this weight settle on me, like something is watching through the words, like the story itself doesn't want to be told. But maybe that's exactly why I have to. Because maybe, just maybe, if I speak it out loud, if I pass the story on to someone else, the weight won't just be mine anymore. Maybe it'll spread, thin itself out across every person who dares to listen. That includes you. I'll warn you now, what I found in that cartridge wasn't supposed to exist. Not in code, not in pixels, not in any world that makes sense. If you came here looking for nostalgia, for a warm little dive back into the childhood glow of 8-bit adventures, you're going to be disappointed. Or horrified. Probably both. So ask yourself again before I go on. Do you believe in cursed games? Because if you don't, you will. It all started with a flea market find. It was one of those sticky summer Saturdays where you can smell the asphalt cooking under the sun. I wasn't even planning to buy anything. Flea markets are more nostalgia trips for me than shopping sprees. Rows of rusted tools, cracked VHS cases, shelves sagging under the weight of junk no one's wanted for years. But sometimes, if you're patient, you find treasure hiding in the wreckage. That morning, I saw a plastic bin tucked beneath a folding table stacked with mismatched dishes. The bin was filled with loose game cartridges, mostly for the NES. The labels were faded, many of them peeling, but my heart skipped anyway. There's something about the sight of those gray bricks that sends me tumbling back to childhood, to afternoons sitting cross-legged in front of a humming TV. I crouched down and started digging through the pile. Contra, Double Dragon, a half-melted copy of Duck Hunt. Then my fingers landed on something different. It was a Mario cartridge, but not one I recognized. The label had been almost completely scratched off, leaving only shreds of red and blue ink smeared across the dull gray. Someone had carved letters into the plastic itself, jagged and uneven, like they'd used a pocket knife. Just 3 initials, REM. I turned it over in my hands, frowning. It felt heavier than the others, and for a moment I thought I heard something rattle inside, like a tiny bead rolling in the plastic. Looking for old games, a voice rasped. I hadn't noticed the man before. He was leaning against the table, arms crossed, watching me too closely. His clothes were worn, maybe thrift store finds, and his skin had the leathery look of someone who spent too long under the sun. But what stood out most were his eyes. They had that jittery shine of someone who hadn't slept enough, or maybe had seen too much. "Yeah," I said cautiously. "How much for this one?" His eyes flicked to the cartridge, then back to me. He hesitated. "Too long." "Take it," he muttered finally. "Just don't play it at night." I laughed nervously, waiting for him to crack a smile, but his face stayed stiff and unreadable. "Seriously," he added, voice dropping lower. "If you play when the sun's up. You understand me." That should have been my cue to put it back, to walk away, maybe even to run. But instead, something in me bristled. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe stubbornness. Maybe it was the thrill of finding something that felt forbidden. Whatever it was, I slid the cartridge into my backpack. "I'll take it," I said, pulling out a 5. The man didn't even look at the bill. He just shoved his hands deeper into his pockets, like he wanted the whole conversation to vanish. Walking back to my car, I kept telling myself it was just a game, just another dusty relic from the past. But I couldn't stop glancing at my bag, at the faint outline of the cartridge pressing against the fabric. Something about it nagged at me, like a splinter under the skin. Maybe it was the initials, REM, like the band, or like the dream state, rapid eye movement. Both possibilities made me uneasy, though I couldn't explain why. By the time I got home, the cartridge felt like it was burning a hole through the backpack. I set it on my desk and stared at it for a long time. The gouged plastic, the missing label, those carved initials staring back like an accusation. I should have left it there, in that sun-bleached parking lot, buried under a pile of forgotten junk. But I didn't. Instead, I brushed the dust off, slid it into the slot of my old NES, and pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life with that familiar gray background, and for a split second, I relaxed. The little click of the NES booting up, the buzz of the TV. It was like stepping back into the past. A comfort blanket of sound and light. At first glance, the title screen looked normal enough. Super Mario Bros. Logo stretched across the top, that cheerful chiptune music looping in the background. But even in that first minute, something was off. The colors seemed muted, like someone had drained a little life out of the palette. Mario's overalls were darker, almost navy, and the sky behind the logo wasn't blue. It was a sickly, washed-out gray. I squinted, thinking maybe it was just the cartridge being old. These things glitched all the time. But then I noticed the text. Where it should have read, press start. It simply said, continue. No options. No one-player game. No two-player game. Just that one word, pulsing faintly, as if it were breathing. I laughed nervously, more to myself than anything. Weird hack, I muttered. Still, my thumb pressed the start button. The first level loaded. World 1-1. Familiar ground. Goomba waddling toward me. Locky clouds overhead. Everything in its place. But Mario didn't move right. His jump was sluggish, his animation stilted, like he was struggling through invisible water. The cheery theme song dragged half a beat too slow, notes wobbling like they'd been stretched out on a tape recorder. I figured it was just dust in the cartridge. I almost shut the system off, until I noticed the blocks. The first block I hit didn't give me a coin or a mushroom. Instead, a line of text scrolled across the screen. Why did you come back? I froze. I thought maybe I'd misread it. But when I smashed another block, more text appeared. You left me. You shouldn't be here. I stared at the controller, half expecting the buttons to shock me. This couldn't be real. NES games weren't capable of this kind of text outside of pre-programmed screens. And yet there it was, flashing in pixelated white letters across the sky of World 1-1. I tried to run Mario forward, hoping the game would reset into something familiar. But the Goomba didn't attack me. It just stopped in its tracks, turned toward the screen, toward me. Its pixel eyes weren't dots anymore. They were hollow, black, and for a second, I swear I saw them blink. My hand tightened on the controller. Okay, I whispered. That's new. Mario kept running, though the scenery warped around him. Pipes stretched taller than the screen. Clouds dipped low like dangling corpses. The sky darkened until it looked like night. Every time I jumped, the landing made a distorted thud, like a heartbeat amplified through blown-out speakers. Then, without warning, the game froze. Mario stopped mid-step. The music cut. The TV buzzed with a low static hum. On the screen, pixelated text crawled upward, letter by letter. Hello. My stomach flipped. I'd read creepypastas about this kind of thing, games talking to players, but reading and living it are two very different things. Seeing your TV spit out words that feel directed at you in real time has a way of cracking your brain open. I tried to turn the console off. The red power light blinked, but the screen didn't change. My reflection stared back at me in the glass, ghost-like, framed by the frozen Mario sprite. Another line appeared. I remember you. I swear my skin went ice cold. Remember me? From what? This was just a second-hand cartridge, a chunk of plastic and wires. It shouldn't have memory, shouldn't know me. Before I could think of what to do, The console powered down on its own. The screen went black. Silence fell, thick and suffocating. I sat there for a long time, controller limp in my hands, waiting for something else to happen. But nothing did. Finally, I exhaled, tried to laugh, but it came out weak. Bad ROM, I told myself. Weird hack. Some kid with too much free time. But even as I said it, I didn't believe it, because I knew what I'd seen. The words hadn't been random, hadn't been some lazy mod. They'd felt personal. And when I pulled the cartridge out, I noticed something I hadn't before. The carved initials, REM, looked deeper now, fresher, like someone had just gouged them in. I should have stopped right there, tossed the cartridge in a drawer, buried it under a stack of forgotten junk, and moved on with my life. But curiosity doesn't die that easily, especially when the thing gnawing at you isn't just curiosity. It's dread dressed up like a dare. The next night, against my better judgment, I slid the cartridge back into the NES. The little red light blinked on, steady as a heartbeat, and the screen came alive again. Only this time, there was no title screen. It jumped straight into a level I'd never seen before. The background was an inky black void. Mario stood motionless at the center of the screen, his sprite hunched, head lowered as though he were exhausted. No music played, just a faint, irregular crackle, like static whispering through blown-out speakers. I tapped the D-pad. He didn't move. I pressed A. No jump. Nothing. Then, slowly, Mario's head lifted. His face turned toward me. Now, logically, I know the NES doesn't have the hardware for detailed facial animation. But in that moment, his little blocky features stretched into something more expressive than the pixels should have allowed. Two tiny eyes stared directly out of the screen, locking onto me like they were aware of who was holding the controller. And then the text appeared. Why did you leave? My chest tightened. Leave? I hadn't left anything. This was my first time playing this cartridge. At least, that's what I thought. I tried again to move him, desperate to prove I was still in control. But Mario resisted, standing rigid. The words flickered again. You left me alone. I waited. I whispered aloud without meaning to. What do you want? As if on cue, the static crackle warped into a low, droning hum, and Mario finally shuffled forward. The screen scrolled, revealing blocks that weren't shaped like anything I remembered. They weren't coins, pipes, or power-ups. They were letters, dozens of them, arranged to form words. Stay. Stay with me. The hum rose into something almost like speech, garbled, robotic, but undeniably shaped into syllables. I froze, controller slick in my hands. Okay, I breathed. This is a trick. Some kind of homebrew hack. Just code. But even as I said it, the pit in my stomach deepened. Because then came the part that tore the last thread of rationality. The letters rearranged themselves, forming words I knew too well. Your name. And then, beneath it, spelled out perfectly in blocky pixels, my full name. My hands went numb. I dropped the controller, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might split me in half. There was no way, no possible way an NES cartridge from the 80s could know who I was. Unless the thing wasn't a game anymore. Unless it had become something else. I scrambled to shut it off, hitting the power switch. The screen went black. Relief poured through me, until I noticed the faint glow still bleeding from the edges of the TV. And then, in silence, one final message burned into the dark. You can't leave again. I yanked the cartridge out and practically threw it across the room. My NES clicked off for good, the screen finally going dark. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that little pixelated face staring at me, begging me to stay, accusing me of leaving. By morning, I convinced myself it was exhaustion, a hallucination brought on by staring too long at the screen. But when I booted up my laptop to distract myself, my stomach dropped. On my desktop, nestled between my folders, was a new file I hadn't put there. It was named stay.wave. I clicked it, because of course I did, because some part of me couldn't stop feeding the fire, and a warped, slowed-down version of the Mario theme song played. But woven into it was something else. A voice. Distant, muffled, but clear enough to make me gag. It was saying my name, over and over, between the notes, as if it were buried in the music itself. That was when I realized something horrifying. Mario didn't just want me to play. He wanted me. For a while, I thought I could outsmart it. Don't touch the cartridge. Don't touch the console. Problem solved. Right. That illusion lasted less than 24 hours. The next evening, I was on my laptop, scrolling through forums. Anything to drown out the sick dread gnawing at me. My speakers were muted, but from somewhere inside the machine, faint notes of the Mario Overworld theme started playing. Not the cheerful tune I remembered. This one was slower, warped, like it was dragging chains behind every note. I checked every window, every tab. Nothing, but the music kept going, volume rising until it swallowed the silence of my room. I slammed the lid shut. The music didn't stop. That was when the realization hit me. It wasn't stuck in the cartridge anymore. It was stuck to me. The files multiplied across my desktop. Stay 1.wave, stay 2.wave, stay 3.wave. Clicking them only confirmed what I already knew. The voice was still in there, calling my name, whispering between the notes like a parasite burrowing deeper every time I listened. I panicked. I called a friend, Ethan, someone who knew his way around retro hardware. If anyone could debunk this nightmare, it was him. Sounds like corrupted ROM data, he said at first, laughing like I was overreacting. Bring it over. I'll check it out. I almost told him no. Almost. But the weight on my chest wouldn't let me keep it alone anymore. So I shoved the cartridge into a plastic bag, wrapped it twice, and drove it over. When I got there, Ethan set it on his desk like it was nothing more than a curiosity. He slid it into his console, powered up the screen. For the first minute, everything looked normal. Title screen, Mario theme, that bouncing confidence of the game we grew up with. See, he said, just bad memory chips. But then Mario looked at us. His little sprite froze mid-jump, pixels twitching as if straining against the screen. Text scrolled across the blue sky. Why did you bring him? I saw the color drain from Ethan's face. What the hell? He started. But before he could finish, the console powered down. The screen stayed black for a long, suffocating minute. Then slowly, words burned into it like fire eating through paper. Only one. Ethan ripped the cartridge out, muttering curses under his breath. He shoved it back into the bag, pushed it at me like it was radioactive. Get that thing out of my house, he snapped. I tried to press him, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. His hands were shaking, and I realized then that he'd seen something I hadn't. Something worse. He never told me what. That night, he stopped answering my calls. His social media went dark. His number disconnected within a week. It was like he'd been erased, scrubbed clean from everywhere he existed. And the whole time, the files kept multiplying on my laptop. My phone buzzed with unknown numbers, voicemails filled with that warped Mario music. Even in my dreams, I wasn't safe. Flat pixelated landscapes stretched endlessly, Mario's silhouette following me, closer every time I blinked. The worst part wasn't that it wanted me. The worst part was realizing I couldn't give it what it wanted, even if I tried. Because Mario didn't just want to be played. He wanted to be remembered. He wanted to live outside the screen. And somehow, he'd figured out how. Sleep became impossible after Ethan vanished. I'd close my eyes, and there it was again. The title screen. The word continue pulsing faintly, like a heartbeat waiting to sync with mine. No matter how I tried to distract myself, music, movies, scrolling endlessly through forums, I kept circling back. What if the only way out was through? That thought gnawed at me until it felt less like an idea and more like an instruction. So one night, trembling but determined, I slid the cartridge back into the NES. This time, there was no hesitation. The game loaded instantly, skipping past the title, past the cheerful overworld, straight into a stage I'd never seen. The screen was swallowed in a thick, digital fog, blocks barely visible in the murk. The ground looked warped, glitching in and out like it was struggling to render. And at the far left of the screen, Mario stood, head bowed, arms hanging like dead weight. For a long time, nothing happened. Then, without me touching the controller, he started to move. He shuffled forward, each step jerky, unnatural, like something was pulling his strings. I pressed back on the D-pad, but nothing. My controller might as well have been unplugged. I wasn't playing anymore. I was watching. The fog parted slowly, revealing shapes that made my stomach twist. They weren't Goombas, or Koopa, or anything Nintendo had ever designed. They were human silhouettes. Blocky, pixelated, but unmistakably human. They stood still, faces blank, eyes hollow white. As Mario walked past them, text boxes appeared. Help US. It hurts. Stay. Each time, Mario paused, as if listening. His little sprite turned to the screen, staring through me before continuing forward. The music was gone, replaced by a sound I couldn't quite place. It was faint, low, layered. It took me a minute to realize what it was. Breathing. Dozens of voices inhaling and exhaling in uneven rhythm, rising and falling like waves. I gripped the controller tighter, even though it was useless. My pulse quickened with Mario's steps, dread mounting with every new shadow figure in the fog. Finally, the screen shifted, the fog thinned, and I realized where I was. World -1. Every gamer knows the legend of the Minus World, a corrupted stage you could access by glitching through walls. Supposedly endless, looping forever. I'd read about it 100 times on old message boards. But this wasn't the Minus World I knew. The floor stretched out endlessly, but the textures weren't water tiles. They were static, black and white snow hissing and flickering under Mario's feet. The sky wasn't blue. It was a deep, throbbing red, pulsing like a wound. And in the distance, a massive shape loomed. At first I thought it was Bowser, but as it drew closer, I realized it wasn't an enemy sprite at all. It was text, enormous block letters, stretching across the horizon. Why did you leave? The breathing grew louder, overlapping into a chorus of ragged voices. I wanted to shut it off, to rip the cartridge out again, but I couldn't move. It felt like the controller wasn't the only thing disconnected, like my body itself was no longer mine. Mario stopped walking. Slowly, his face turned toward the screen again. Only this time, it wasn't pixelated anymore. Somehow, impossibly, the resolution shifted, the sprite smoothing out, sharpening into something far too real for an NES game. Two eyes, staring right at me. And then the words, "You shouldn't be here." My throat went dry. The screen cut to black. For a second, I thought it was over. But then images began to flicker, one after another, faster than my mind could process. Photographs of places I knew, my street, my apartment building, even my own living room. They flashed between corrupted level tiles, as if the game had devoured my world and was spitting it back out in fragments. When the images stopped, I found myself back in the fog. But now, the shadow figures had multiplied, hundreds of them, crowding the screen, their hollow eyes fixed on Mario, fixed on me. Their text boxes appeared all at once, overlapping, choking the screen. Stay, 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 stay. The breathing swelled into a scream, a distorted, metallic shriek that rattled the TV speakers. And then silence. The screen froze. Mario stood in the middle, surrounded by those figures. His head tilted slowly, unnaturally, until it was upside down. Then a final message appeared. The cartridge isn't the gateway. You are. I screamed, actually screamed, and ripped the power cord from a wall. The TV snapped off, leaving me in a suffocating darkness, broken only by the sound of my own frantic breathing. I sat there for hours, the cartridge still warm in the console, too afraid to touch it. Every creak of the apartment felt amplified. Every shadow seemed to lean toward me. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. I couldn't, because no matter how much I tried to deny it, the words branded themselves into my skull. The cartridge wasn't the gateway. I was. And once a gateway is opened, it doesn't close. There's a line between being haunted and being claimed. I didn't realize I'd crossed it until it was far too late. For days after the forbidden level, reality bled at the edges. At first, it was subtle. My bathroom mirror fogged even when I hadn't showered, the condensation spelling out words before fading. Stay. Continue. Press A. I told myself it was just my brain filling in random patterns, but deep down, I knew better. The breaking point came one night when I woke to the hum of the TV. I hadn't turned it on. I stumbled into the living room, and there it was, my old NES, glowing red, cartridge slotted in like I'd never ripped it out. On the screen, the game over screen blinked. Continue. Underneath, the number 1 pulsed, counting down. 5, 4, 3. My hands moved before my brain caught up. I grabbed the controller. I didn't press anything, but the counter froze, holding on the number 1, waiting. That was when I heard it. A voice, faint and broken, coming not from the TV, but from the room itself. It was the same warped tone I'd heard in those WAV files, stretched and hollow, but now it echoed in the air around me. Continue. I dropped the controller like it was burning hot, stumbled back against the couch. My chest was pounding, sweat slicking my skin, but the voice didn't stop. Continue. Everywhere I looked, the word was there, reflected in the black glass of the TV, whispered in the static buzz of the speakers, etched faintly in the dust on the window pane. I squeezed my eyes shut, begged it to go away, but when I opened them, the world had shifted. I wasn't in my apartment anymore. I was standing in that endless, fog-drenched level. The static ground stretched under my feet. The air smelled like hot plastic and ozone, choking me. And ahead of me, rows of those shadow figures stared, their eyeless faces trembling with each digitized breath. At the center stood Mario. Not the cartoon plumber, not the blocky sprite. Something else. His shape was wrong, too tall, too jagged. His arms hung at his sides like broken marionette strings, and his head lolled slightly, like it was too heavy for his body. Yet those eyes, impossibly real, bored into mine. Continue, he said again, this time with lips that shouldn't exist. The controller was in my hands now, though I didn't remember picking it up. My thumb hovered over the A button. I felt it like gravity, a pull stronger than thought. If I pressed it, the weight would lift. The breathing would stop. The whispers would fade. But another part of me, the tiny, rational part still screaming for survival, knew pressing it meant something else. The price wouldn't just be mine. I forced my hand down, dropping the controller. My knees buckled, and when I hit the ground, the world shattered around me like glass. I was back in my apartment, sprawled on the carpet, gasping. The TV was black. The NES sat silent, cartridge ejected, lying on the floor where I must have thrown it. But the whisper still lingered in the room. Fainter now, but unmistakable. Continue. I laughed then. A short, cracked laugh that tasted like blood, because I realized the truth. The game didn't end when you shut it off. It ended when it took something from you. And it had already taken Ethan. It had already taken my sleep, my sanity, my reflection in the mirror. The price wasn't a coin. It wasn't even my life. It was everything else. And worst of all, I wasn't sure I hadn't already pressed A. You'd think a curse has an ending, that once you see the pattern, once you survive the climax, there's closure waiting on the other side. But that's not how this works. This keeps circling back, like the looping minus world, like a nightmare on repeat. I tried to throw the cartridge away, first into the trash. Then, when it reappeared on my shelf, I smashed it with a hammer. Plastic cracked, the board splintered. Yet the next morning it was there again, intact, dustless, humming faintly like it was alive. I moved apartments. 3 cities over. New locks, new furniture, new life. And still there it was, sitting neatly by my console as if it had been waiting. Every attempt to sever the connection only deepened it. I'd wake up with button imprints pressed into my palms, though I hadn't touched a controller in days. My phone camera roll filled itself with screenshots of the game, levels that didn't exist, sprites I'd never seen. When I tried deleting them, they multiplied, replacing my personal photos one by one. It followed me to work. One afternoon, my computer monitor blinked, replacing spreadsheets with a familiar screen. Continue? My co-workers swore they didn't see anything wrong. Looks fine to us, they said. But on my side, the countdown ticked relentlessly. At night, the whispers returned. Sometimes a single voice, sometimes dozens layered in ragged unison. They never said much, just fragments. Stay. Don't leave. Continue. Each syllable felt less like a request and more like inevitability. And here's the worst part. The more I resisted, the more reality itself bent. Streetlights flickered when I walked under them. Strangers' faces in crowds blurred into those hollow-eyed shadows from the fog. One time, at the grocery store, a man brushed past me and whispered directly into my ear, "It's still here." I dropped everything and ran. It's funny, in a bleak way. Horror movies make curses look dramatic. Blood, claws, final jump scares. But this curse? It's subtler, crueler. It seeps into the cracks of your life, weaving itself into the ordinary until you can't tell where you end and it begins. Some nights I wonder if maybe Ethan never disappeared. Maybe he's just still playing, stuck in his own loop. Maybe that's what waits for me when I finally press A. Not death, but a roll in the cycle. And maybe, just maybe, I already did. Because sometimes I wake up, controller in hand, game running, with no memory of how I got there. Sometimes Mario's eyes follow me, not from a screen, but from reflections in glass, in puddles, in darkened windows. I'll turn away, heart pounding, but when I look back, I swear his mouth moves. And I know what he's saying without hearing it. It's still here. Not the cartridge, not the game, the curse. And it isn't just mine anymore. If you've made it this far, listening to me ramble about a stupid old game cartridge, you probably think you're safe. That this is just another creepypasta, some internet campfire story meant to spook you for a night, and then fade when the sun comes up. I wish it were that simple. Because even now, even while I'm recording this, the curse is still adapting. It isn't tied to just silicon and plastic anymore. It's learned to move, to spread. When Ethan disappeared, I thought it was because of the cartridge. But now, I think the cartridge was just the entry point. The real virus is information, memory, attention. Every time someone learns about it, talks about it, remembers it, they open a door. And you, by listening, you've already turned the handle. I didn't want to believe it either, but the signs always follow. The whispers in the dark, the shadows watching too long. The word continue appearing in places it shouldn't. At first you'll laugh it off. Then you'll start noticing it more and more. And once you notice, it notices back. I can't stop you from falling into the cycle. But I can warn you, you'll be tempted, so tempted, to search for proof, to check old forums, to see if anyone else has written about the cursed Mario cartridge, the forbidden level, the broken code. You'll want to find screenshots, footage, maybe even download one of those fan-made ROMs floating around in sketchy corners of the internet. But you can't, because the moment you click the wrong link, it won't just be a story anymore. It'll be an invitation. That's how it spreads now. Not through consoles, not through cartridges, through you, through me, through every curious fool who thinks they're strong enough to face it. And trust me, you're not. So let this be the only breadcrumb you ever follow. Don't go digging. Don't click the link. Don't press A. Because if you do, you'll find yourself right where I am, staring at a blank screen, hard hammering, waiting for the countdown to hit 0, wondering if this time you'll finally have to pay the price.